Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is the making of Back, Part 1, where we talk about the arrangement and the things that are in here. This is the very first making of video for the entirety of all of them, for the EP, and the first one for this track. It's the first, lots of firsts, but we're doing it, it's happening, and I'm excited because this EP is great, and I'm fond of it. So just to remind you, these projects that you're looking at, this exact project right here is actually available for you to buy if you want to get your hands on it. Link in the description takes you to the little store page, and what you want is the deluxe version of the EP. You can get individual ones too. Anyway, let's talk about this project. So this project, this guy, wow, is a very specific deal for me. It actually requires a little bit of a history to understand it. When I first started producing music, this was around 2004, like the kind of music I wanted to make was essentially this style, this like breakbeat, you know, Chemical Brothers, Overseer style, that kind of stuff, Crystal Method, whatever. Like this sort of vaguely, well, when they were doing it, vaguely hip-hoppy kind of thing. And then it slowly morphed into drum and bass for me, and then, you know, noisy and metal, and then eventually we got here. But, like, at the very beginning of my career, I was just obsessed with this specific kind of just, like, groovy-ass breakbeat stuff. And, like, if you want specific examples of inspiration for this, go check out pretty much, like, literally any track by Overseer. Like, Overseer, the word over, and then the word seer, which if you've never seen is S-E-E-R, which is, as far as the English word goes, is just the top of all kinds of dumbness, because English. But anyway, but that's the kind of stuff that I wanted to do. And this is, even then, this is already a very old track. In fact, this bass that's in here, I actually have a How to Bass for that. And it's How to Bass 79. If you're not keeping up with How to Bass, I just put out How to Bass 159 today. So that's how old this song is. It took this long to put out because I didn't really, like, I made this part and then I made the intro. I didn't really know where to go with it because I learned a lot about writing songs since I first started producing. And a lot of what I learned didn't really apply to this track. And that's because of the genre of this particular kind of breakbeat stuff doesn't really work the same way as a lot of modern EDM, and a lot of the values that you look for in like modern electronic stuff, like bass music, don't really work for the older kind of thing. And then when you try to integrate those particular styles, it doesn't mesh particularly well, at least in my opinion. So I left it alone for a while, and eventually I realized, oh, I have to treat it like it's one of those old tracks. And if you go and listen to any of those old tracks, you start to notice a couple of things. One is that they're pretty groovy. They do their thing, they're great, they're groovy, and they go on forever without really doing anything or changing anything or going anywhere. And so this kind of track can exist. We have a beat with a bass and like some chords. Just some chords. And like some beeps. Which in the case of this song is just the chords again. And then just do that, and then you break down, and you come back up, and you do the same thing again. There's not a lot of variation, and what little variation there is super subtle anyway. And oftentimes, it's the same thing again when the thing comes back. And the whole point of that is the word groovy. The word groovy in this particular context means is that it doesn't really assault you with crazy changes and new sounds and just the complexity. It just kind of goes. And this is like an entire genre of music that seems to have been created for the express purpose of being behind stuff. Case in point, I only know who Overseer is because their music ended up in the trailers for Matrix a lot. Same thing with Crystal Method, for that matter. That sort of stuff just makes, and you know, Need for Speed and whatever. People joke all the time about like, this should be a Need for Speed. And like this is the stuff that was in Need for Speed in the originals, older versions, and you know, that kind of stuff. So like it's really like that kind of music, and like it's not supposed to really engage you that hard. It's supposed to get you with the groove and then just kind of let you go, and then you're honestly better served doing something else while you're listening to it. And with this in mind, I just went and did that to finish it, and the track just ended. Like I had such a hard time with it because like I was trying to make like modern electro vibes with crazy transitions and basses and sound design and really attention grabbing things work with this, and that just wasn't happening. But yeah, so let's talk about what's actually in this track. All three things. You know, just sort of because you're going to get this project, if you buy it, let's sort of identify some things that are happening that are a little bit odd. You can see here that this says, in case you don't have Superior Drummer, and that's because the drums, while they are there's plenty of samples in there, there's also Superior Drummer. This is Superior Drummer 2. I mean, I don't even know if you can even get Superior Drummer 1 anywhere. That'd be kind of weird if you did, but Superior Drummer 2, 2 point whatever, and then this is the Metal Foundry expansion. Pretty great. I enjoy it a lot, and it's just part of the loop, you know. And then I have all these hats and stuff. So these are rendered out because they were not my samples. And in fact, I kind of ran into this problem a lot with a lot of projects in this EP where I don't own the samples, and that doesn't really matter when you're making the track. Like they are copyright, or rather royalty free, which is to say that you can use them in commercial projects. You do not owe the creators money, unless you bought it and then you gave them money, and then that's your license. That's you bought the license to use that stuff in your track. You do not, however, have the right to sell them again, or even to give them away for free. By the way, people do that constantly, and you really shouldn't. So I wouldn't be able to sell them if I had this in there. So what I have elected to do is, for where possible, I have converted them into new samples, because I did do a lot of changes in certain samples at certain times to essentially make them new samples, and just rendered them as that, so that you don't actually have access to the source material. You only have access to like my version of it. And this hat loop is one of those ideas. Along with just the loop itself being there present, it's also got the processing on it. It's also got the side chaining on it, so that when it gets played, it's essentially it fits the way it's supposed to. There's a bunch of different hats. I didn't just make a giant hat stem because there's only like 2 or 3 loops for the hats, so I just kind of did the 2 or 3 loops, and now they're individual wave files. Same thing with the actual Superior Drummer rendered samples, which I did do as well, because not very many people actually have Superior Drummer. So if you don't have Superior Drummer, you can just turn that on, and it'll sound identical to the actual finished version. The samples that are in here are similar. They are combinations, like there's layers and processing that went on to make this sound the way it did. And I just kind of went to the top level and just recorded where that was, and that ended up being, how it went into mix, for that matter. A lot of that happened for a lot of things in the other songs, a bit more comprehensive in the other songs, just because it required it more. Other things in this track include, like, I use a couple things from the Leviathan sample pack from Black Octopus Sound, the None Like Joshua sample pack from Black Octopus Sound, and Sonics, actually, from Cell Dweller. And those sounds, they were never used bare. Processing existed and occurred to them, so I just recorded them as they were processed. So like this breaky bit, for example. So that fade in, that filtering, and like the love filter-esque IEF type filter is all in there, and that's just a sample now. It's a little bit of a bummer because this means that the sound design portion will be a bit bleak, just because I can't really show you what happened to make the sound sound the way it did. But it was mostly, it's just that kind of stuff was mostly just like the effecty kind of things, just like these NLJ samples. I used distortion to make them sound like that, and I just recorded them with distortion. So now these samples are irreparably destroyed, so that you don't actually have access to the actual for real source material. And thus I am not stealing things and giving them to you. This ambient thing was a sort of ambient sound, and then I was filtering it, put on reverb, not whatever, and this boom sound was one of the was an impact from somewhere, and then I like low passed it, compressed it, and reverbed it, whatever, just so that it turns into one of these kind of things. I probably in retrospect could have just made a sound like that, but the reason why I didn't just replace all of those things with things that I just could have made myself is because this track, and actually a lot about how this track was mixed and mastered, and the reason why I printed it like this is because it was when I made it really long time ago with my particular methods of doing things back then. I got really used to how this sounds. It's such a perfect, for me anyway, a perfect combination of like what exemplified that like 2005 breakbeat style, and any sort of modernization of mixing technique ruined that. It like ruined the feel because it made it too good, like too legit. It was very strange. And there's also a little bit of like composer's deafness where you're just used to hearing something sound a certain way, and any deviation whatsoever from how that sounds will then sound to you as weird and bad, even if to someone else thinks that change is exactly what needs to happen because it legitimately like straight up needs to be that way, but you just can't deal with it because your brain is just too used to hearing it in a particular way. It's really hard to get around that, and I just elected not to. So that's why a lot of things just stayed the way they were instead of just being done in a smarter way. So the main bass is just a harmer. It's like I said, how to bass 79 if you want to go see that now. I will be talking about this in the sound design portion of the making ofs for these. The chords are also a harmer, and I have this repeater thing. This is this orange business here. This kind of like RB bullshit was present in just so much of that like breakbeat stuff. And like that sort of thing is that sort of thing is something that you don't really pay attention to or even can even hear most of the time unless someone points it out to you. That's kind of like the story of the song, is that just like this bass line was just so exactly what I needed it to be that I just didn't change it. It's the same thing the entire time. I under no circumstances do I ever deviate from it, because anytime I did or tried to, it was just not a good time. I even did like real basic stuff for the time, like lowered the automation so that when the chords came in, it was slightly a diminished version of the exact same automation. And that just brought it right back. So the way that I did that is I had this automation clip, which is just controlling the bandpass inside the harmer. That's the main automation. And then I have this second automation clip, which is controlling the height of the various automation clips. There's more than one automation clip here. I just linked all of them to this thing eventually. And what that does is this means that for right there, for that 1 second, the height of these are actually artificially lowered a bit. So that means that it's essentially, it doesn't go as high. What else is happening in the beginning? So I use a lot of gross beat in this, actually. Like the scratching and jelly things are actually happening live. Which is just really cool. I like gross beat for that kind of like that sort of scratchy business. It's pretty great for me. Fading in with the bass in here, lots of delay, like input and that kind of thing. You have the build of the repeater and the chords kind of doing their thing. And as far as the actual build goes, you notice that there isn't like a riser going on here, and it's just because it just didn't sound right with a riser. And then I even put a snare rise, like a snare build. This guy. And it's just the 909, I think. Might be a 707. Nope, 909. And I also built in, I have this baked in NLJ. And that little bit of lead in right there at the very end is like the only deviation from like coming back. This is basically just the intro again with the same sort of build up happening and that kind of thing. Like once I realized that there was just no escaping how simple this track was going to be, it obviously became a lot easier, because the whole reason this took so long for me to finish is I tried to put complexity where there could not be any, because that's just not how the genre works. Which is not to say that you can't do that. Like there are plenty of modern breakbeat marvels, honestly, that are full of just like great sound design and great complexity, whatever. But they also have the right feel for that. Like this particular track has the feel of a track that is just a groove. You just put it on and you just let it go, and it just happens, and you don't read into it too much. That's what this track is. That's what this track is supposed to be. Not that, I mean, whatever. If you don't like it because it's too repetitive, I fully am fine with that, because it completely is. Like, that's a valid complaint, and that's fully what's happening in this track. So I'm not going to be like, you're not doing it right. You know, I'm not going to be one of those game developers that's just like, you're just missing the point, man. Like, if you're not into it, I fully get it. That's fine. I was rather surprised by how well received this track was for that exact reason, because I just sort of assumed that lots of people would just be like, wow, this is boring. Shows you what I know. What else is in here that's important? Nothing. Not a single thing. Everything about this is super duper simple. This is like the easiest. This is gonna be the easiest making I've ever. Because like once you see what makes the bass be a thing in the next video, you're just gonna be like, well, of course. And this is the end of that. Like the chords, there's nothing happening in the chords. It's all so basic. It's so basic. And let me tell you something. Like if it weren't for like the vaguely modern sort of new agey sound design aspect of the main bass itself, I would have had a hard time making this. I was into it. I was into the genre in the beginning when I was first producing because I couldn't do anything. It's like my main focus was just drums because that's all I was able to actually do sound design wise. It wasn't about making sounds at that point. It was about finding sounds. I was really good at loops. I was really good at arranging and cutting loops, which is like, if you listen to a lot of this old stuff, it's really all that it is. It's that exact thing. And like actually, the term breakbeat, I don't know if you knew this, but the term breakbeat is referring to the section of particular funk songs where all the instruments drop out and we just hear the drums by themselves. They play whatever groove they want to play. It's kind of like a drum solo, but it's less flashy. They just play the break. They just play what they've been playing by themselves. And so early hip hop artists and people who made this kind of stuff would just go sample those breakbeats, and that's how they made their music. And so that's where it's like, you know, getting into loop cutting and slicing is pretty important for this particular genre. Not that I did any of that for this track. I just wrote sampled lines with superior genre, which is like the antithesis of any kind of like old school sampling. Or just doing it as opposed to finding a recording of someone who did it in the 70s and then cutting it up because that's all you can do. You know, it's weirdly philosophical, the differences that are important there. Yeah. Hope you found all that rambling valuable. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And don't forget that if you want to pick up this project, you can do so on the Fix store under Seamless, and the deluxe version of this EP, the Wizard Bass EP. You can get individual projects if you want to, or you can get the entire thing for a bit of a discount. But yes, and as usual, have a nice day.